What's up, guys? In this video I'm going to be going over my reconstructions for the 22.33 first place FMC Mo3 that I got at the 2023 World Championships in South Korea. I won't be going too in-depth into like NISI analysis stuff, mostly because I haven't really done it, but rather I'm going to share kind of my feelings going into each attempt, as this was definitely like my most stressful official meet of three that I've done recently, as I was kind of the favorite going into this competition. There were a lot of kind of expectations, both me putting them on myself and from others, not in like a toxic way or anything, but you know, people like to see good people do well. It's just kind of part of cubing. So to start off, this was the first attempt, which was on the first day of competition, a little after lunchtime. And this scramble was quite bad. It was, I believe, something like only 5 total 4-move VOs or something. And I don't think any of the axes were less than 4 bad edges, which means very likely you will need to check 5-move VOs if the 4-movers don't go so well. For this one, I didn't have to resort to 5-move VOs, which I'm always quite happy about, as I find that kind of checking approach is very volatile and kind of dependent on just finding the correct EO, which isn't very fun. But anyway, for this first attempt, I got a 22, which really helped to calm my nerves, as I felt it was a really good result given the quality of the scramble. So to start off with my solution, I did the FB EO, so green front, and it was 8 bad edges. The 4 good edges are here, 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 and here. So you can do R2 and then U or U prime to set up an FB type finish. I personally did R2, U, F, and then B prime. And on this particular axis, I saw that it was like 8C, not 8 edges, and it's probably the wrong 8C to begin with. Yeah, it is, because it's H pi. So I checked this axis and I saw it was 6C8E, which is a bit more usable. And from here I saw that you could do a U to give DR minus 4C4E, and then you've kind of got like all these pairs and stuff. I originally tried doing like this kind of like column building, but I couldn't find any good DRs that way. They're also a bit longer than what I ended up doing. So what I did after the U was I did a D2, and you set up these like symmetrical L plus pair shapes, and the E slice is such that it has the components needed for a 4-move finish, once you account for like adjustments of the, well in this case, the L and R faces. And due to the symmetry, there were 2 ways to get an 11-move DR from this state. The one I went with starts with L, and then you have this kind of 4-mover with B2, R prime, B2, and in the case of myself, I did D prime, and this gave me an 11-move DR with 1 quarter turn corners, but 3 quarter turn HDR subset, as it was 4 corner, 6 edges. This has a couple like 6-move HDR triggers, but I didn't find anything on this side of the scramble. So I switched from normal to inverse, and I saw that it was instantly set up for one of the 6-move triggers. So I did R to give HDR minus 4 edges, and then you can just do U2, and then it's kind of like this sort of thing, or this. The one I went with was R U2 D2 L prime. And without even needing to like do any slice rewrite stuff, I kind of immediately saw the optimal finish, as there's just so many blocks everywhere. To start off, I did a B2, which essentially just sets up kind of like, so the slice layers are L and R, but you can pretty easily see that the blue and greens are like a very simple kind of flop reduction finish. You just do like B2 instead of F2 to account for like this slice. And it's just U2, R2, and then F2, B2. And that gave me a 22 for Scramble 1. After this solve, I found out that Cyprian from Poland also had a 22, but he used the NIS 4-move VO that was like 2 moves to 4 bad and then switch. He actually found a really cool solution from that. But yeah, so we were tied after the first attempt, and we were the only people with 22s, which I think helped calm my nerves a lot, as we tend to check different stuff. Other than that, Mark Bojanowski had a 23 on this scramble, I believe. So I had a 1-move lead on him, and then everyone else had 24 or worse. Notably, Chong Wen got, I believe, a 26, and on the one hand, I want to see Chong Wen do well, as he is not only a good friend of mine, but also one of my, I wouldn't say like practice partners, but someone I discuss a lot of like FMC theory with. So the competitor in me was happy because I saw him as kind of like my biggest threat to getting first place, but you know, on the other hand, I would love to share the podium with like all my friends. Notably, him and Mark Boynowski are two people I spend a lot of time either doing attempts with on like VC and Discord, or discussing theory, or both. So yeah, overall, after this attempt, I feel like I really needed to do well on the first one, so I didn't feel like I had to play catch up. So having this kind of like 1 to 2 move lead on most people that I saw as like podium threats was, I think, quite helpful for me going into attempt 2 and calming some of my nerves. So that's it for solve number 1. I'll now get into solve number 2. For solve number 2, I got a 23, which, given the quality of the scramble, I was decently happy with. I thought that this scramble in some ways was better than the previous in terms of like number of 4-move EOs, but also worse than the previous in the sense that I found the 4-move EOs to be a lot less cooperative than the previous scramble. So this was sort of a nerve-wracking-ish attempt, but I did know that due to having somewhat of a lead on most people, I didn't need to worry about trying to get like a 22 or better. So when I had a 23, I think in the first like 40 minutes, I think that calmed me down quite a bit. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the best use of the remaining like 20 or so minutes of the attempt, as I was distracted for reasons that I would rather not get into in this video. But yeah, there was a bit of a distraction towards like the later third of my attempt. Regardless, I don't think it affected much. So yeah, I'll just get into the solve now. So for this one, I did actually use a 5-move EO, which is somewhat rare for me, but given the quality of the scramble, it's a very reasonable thing to check. I did the red-orange front axis, and I initially found a 4-move NIS EO. So currently we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bad edges. And what I saw was that you can do B and then R prime, and that gives 4 bad with 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I saw that this EO could be done in 2 more moves on the other side of the scramble with just like a quarter turn and then moving the orange layer. So I did that, I then switched, and we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 bad edges, so this seems to be done with a D and an L. I should also mention I started the scramble on inverse, not normal. I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. But yeah, so we started off on inverse and then we switched back to normal. I tried doing DL, I couldn't find much from it, if I recall correctly. So what I tried instead was I did R2, and then D, and then L prime. And that gave me instant 4C 4E on this axis. This one, I don't think I found anything from it. And we also have this pair here and this pair here. There's probably a lot of ways you can get decently viable like 11 to 12 move DRs. I'm now kind of realizing I could have taken a similar approach to before where I like set up the L shapes, but I don't know if that would have been very good. What I ended up doing was more of like a columns approach. So from here, there's a bunch of ways to do it, again due to symmetry. I went with F prime, and then I make this column with R2, and there's a couple ways to finish this DR. The most efficient is just do F2, U2, B, and then in my case I did a D, and this gave me DR and 11 with effectively the same subset. It's 4 corners, it's 1 quarter turn, but it's the wrong number of edges. In this case it's 4C2E instead of 4C6E, but these are slice equivalents of one another. So effectively I was working with the same type of DR on the first 2 scrambles. 11 move DR, 1 quarter corners, but not 4 edges, and not like 8 or 0 edges. Like basically like the second best one you can get. After that I moved away from normal and came back to inverse. And by doing BR prime instead of BR, I noticed that you could do D2 and then F, and that D2 just sets up basically the same trigger as before, where you get like the 4E thing that can be done a few different ways. And they did U2, F prime, R2, L2, and then B. Yeah, I did B. And now we have this kind of case with the F and B layers where it's close to like a floppy reduction. I saw that you could do D2, and that sets up the perfect floppy reduction case where you have like all these pairs that kind of cascade into one another. I then did B2, L2, U2, R2. That gave me leave slice in 23 moves. And I found a +0 move rewrite, which I will just quickly demonstrate. And the way the rewrite works is you essentially do fat F, U2, fat F prime instead, and then the rest of the solution just works the same, like D2, B2, etc., etc. So after this attempt, the best on the scramble was Cyprian, Chung Wen. He found a 22, and Cyprian actually did quite poorly on this attempt. I think he had some sort of backup thing that failed to work in like the last juncture of the attempt, so he had to find something else and just scrape something together. He ended up getting, I believe, a 28. As for other people, Mark Bojanowski, who was just one move behind me the previous attempt, got a 25. And then, as for like other notable people, all I really remember is I believe Kyungmin Choi got a DNF on this one, which was quite tragic. As I believe he had a decent shot after the first one, since he had a 25 for getting a podium. This attempt, knowing how the first two had gone, gave me a lot of confidence going into the final scramble, as I had now basically secured a 3-move lead, at least, on everyone else. The 3-move lead being on Mark Bojanowski and Chung Wen, my two close friends. So the competitor in me was happy that I had such a lead. And also the friend in me was quite happy because it looked like both of them were poised to make it to the podium, which would have made me very happy, as, you know, as I said, they're very close friends of mine and quite special people when it comes to like my passion for FMC. So with that, I will now get into the final attempt for Worlds. For the final scramble, I got a 22. And you might remember I got a 22 on the first scramble and was extremely happy with it. In this case, I was extremely disappointed because this was an amazing scramble. I would say this was just as good, if not better, than the first scramble I got in my most recent 21 flat mean of 3. It was basically 4 or less bad edges everywhere, plenty of 4-move EOs, a good number of 3-movers, and even a 2-move EO. Even though I had a 3-move lead, once I saw the scramble, I immediately got quite nervous, as I knew, due to it being an extreme scramble, whether it's extremely good or extremely bad, it's just a very volatile environment for FMC, as if a scramble is like very good or very bad, you do have to have a very strong breadth of search before going deep into anything. And it's definitely the kind of scramble where you would be disappointed with anything worse than a 20, I would say, assuming you're like a decently high-level solver. One little bit of backstory I will mention is that I found a 20 to slice pretty early on, realized it was not going to be solvable in 0, and saved it kind of for later as a backup 21. And in the last like 10 minutes, I realized it just stopped working. I don't know why it stopped working. I think I must have like allocated which sequences corresponded to which DRs or something. But regardless of what happened, I basically panicked and went with this backup skeleton in the end. And I'll just get into the solve real quick and then talk a bit more about that. So the EO I went with was just the 2-mover. This is on inverse scramble. You just do B2 and then U or U prime. I personally did U prime. The original 8-move DR I found was just you do B prime and then it's this like 5-move JZP case that gave 8+3. But I didn't end up doing that, even though I should have, and there was a very findable, probably multiple findable 20s from that DR, but nothing I had was actually even going to lead to that, which I want to say is more or less due to just being very nervous at like how volatile the scramble was. After that, I switched, and what I went with was I saw you can do an R to give 4C4E in 3 moves, and then just some very simple column building. We've already kind of got the slice accounted for atop this column. I did F prime, L2, F, R2, B, R. This gave me a 9-move DR with 2/4 turn 4C4E, and the rest of the solution is done on normal. Again, I had this written down as kind of like a backup, and I knew that because it was 2/4 turns, it was kind of unlikely there would be a +0. And for this kind of scramble, I honestly thought I could have blown my lead on it, because if either Mark Bojanowski or Xiong Wen found a 19 on this scramble, and there was a competitor that found a 19, Simon Kellum found one from a 10-move DR. Had either of them found that, I would have lost on single. So kind of going into the attempt, I sort of thought if I found a 21, there's probably like a 95% chance I win, but 22, it becomes iffy. And I think if I got a, if I got a 23, it could have very well been over for me. Anyways, I'll just get into this skeleton I did. So it's 4C4E. I saw that you could do, what was it? Yeah, you do B2 first to account for like the fake HDR parity stuff. And then you do kind of an L2 to set up the case. And then there's 4 different ways to get to HDR in 16 from here. The one I went with was U2 instead of D2, F, and then R2 instead of L2, and then U2, and then F again. And then this is kind of similar to before, like you set up to the same floppy reduction case. You do U2 and then you get all of these pairs. R2, U2, L2, F2. That gave me leaf slice in 21. And because I couldn't get my previous 20 to slice to work, I had to go with this just to get something down in the last 10 minutes. Usually 10 minutes remaining is not very stressful for me, as I have done much more risky stuff. However, when it's Worlds and you have a 3-move lead, it's not so simple as it turns out. I will quickly show the kind of the rewrite I ended up doing. So F2, I'm just undoing stuff. U2. Yeah, so since there were no +0s, I tried basically inserting a S slice into one of the double turns, and the one I found was you could do BF, U2, R2, and then F, D2, R2B. So that just adds 1 move to the HDR, but it accounts for the slice correctly, and then you can just do 5 more moves, like so. And that gave me a 22. So for other competitors, Kyungmin Choi got a 20. I think Mark Bojanowski got a 24, but he was a couple minutes away from finding a 23, which would have given him podium. So that's unfortunate. I feel for my boy, obviously. I can't remember everyone who got like 20 or 21, etc. I already mentioned Simon found a 19, and he was the only person to get sub 20 on the scramble. Kata Kukala and Guido Di Pietro both found 20s and eventually made it onto the podium as a result, despite lackluster starts. Cyprian also found a 20 and was able to bounce back from kind of a nightmare scenario solve 2, very much akin to what I had to deal with, but obviously a more extreme version of it. I know Sebastian Aru found a 20 in like 10 or 15 minutes and then I think left, which just makes me feel bad and insecure about my abilities. And then also notably Xiong Wen, he found a 20, but he did not cross out his backup correctly. There were still some visible moves, so he got a DNF instead. Had that not happened, he would have gotten second place by 1 move. But instead, after this solve, I had won with 22.33. Cyprian got second with 23.33, which is, again, just maintaining the 3-move lead. And then Guido and Carter tied for 3rd place with 24 flat means and a 20 single. So, overall, very happy I was able to win. However, I would say I had a lot more fun at the previous World Championships, since being a high-level competitor naturally introduces a lot more stress into the competition. I don't think it like ruined my experience or anything, but I was definitely like a bit on edge and somewhat like non-responsive at times during like the first 3 days of Worlds, or like first 2 days of Worlds and like the first half of day 3. As after this, I was obviously a lot more chill. Yeah, that's about it. I did it. Woo. More videos coming soon, probably. Next major project on the channel will be like a DR HDR guide for FMC, as I feel like it's high time I do that. I'm now pretty confident with my knowledge of each step. So yeah, that'll be coming in the near-ish future. Not too soon, I have to rest and I've got some other stuff I need to do. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. Anyways, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.